Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Jersey Jump Shot, New Jersey's first and only podcast dedicated exclusively to college hoops in the Garden State. I'm Jerry Carino. The season is over, 2024-25, but the drama continues. It's portal season, and I'm doing a very rare solo show answering your mailbag questions because there's been, let's be honest, a lot of gnashing of teeth as the first few weeks of the transfer portal and free agency has unfurled this April. So I asked you for questions. You responded. I appreciate that. I have done a little homework on this. I'm not just going to be totally spitballing. I've made some calls. I've done some homework. I've done some digging and got I think some answers. And there's some things, to be honest, I just don't know. I'm not afraid to say I don't know everything. I don't know a lot of things because, as you know, much of what's going on in this free agency free-for-all goes on in secrecy with very little transparency. So I'm doing the best I can to try to illuminate what I can for you. So with that said, let's go to it. The way we're going to do this is we're going to go Rutgers questions first, since Rutgers comes first in the alphabet. We'll do Rutgers questions first, then we'll go into Seton Hall questions. Some of these themes cross over. Both these programs are in a similar state. Financially, as of now, they've each added 2 transfers. Obviously, that could change, but they're both in sort of a similar financial ecosystem, battling against high major peers with a lot more money right now. So let's jump right into it. First, with the Rutgers mailbag. All right, question 1: what is going on with Rutgers GM position? Jonathan Holloway is mailing it in. That's what's going on. The outgoing university president has not signed off on the position, is our understanding. This is just a horrendous way for him to end his tenure. Again, this is the same clown who canceled graduation in 2021. 2021, he canceled graduation, ruining a special moment for thousands of students when just about every other school went ahead and had their graduation. It's the same bozo who let Pat Hobbs run roughshod over the athletic department. Pat's more concerned with tarot card readings and building an NIL infrastructure. So Holloway, who has long been eyeing the exit, who has long had one foot out the door, is leaving his basketball coaches and his interim AD twisting in the wind while he counts his money heading out toward his next stop. And so that GM position is not going to be filled in time to help Rutgers in this cycle. We kind of saw that coming anyway, but it's just taking so long. And the responsibility for that lies at the top of the university. How is Rutgers allocating their NIL money? Does Tariq Francis project to be a bench piece or a key player? Tariq Francis, NJIT guard who committed to the Scarlet Knights over the weekend. Okay, I'll try to answer this as best as I can. Rutgers, as far as I can tell, is trying to spread out their NIL money among 13 guys rather than going for $1 million portal ads of your proven high-level impact transfers. To me, the only way that really can work, the best way that their method works is if you're going to be pressing the hell out of opponents and you need a lot of bodies. We went through this with Seton Hall last year and the year before. Just by way of comparison, 2 years ago, Seton Hall had 7 guys, basically had a 7-man rotation. They won 25 games, finished 4th in the Big East. Last year they tried to spread the money out among 13 guys, and they had a lot of those guys were busts, and they had no impact players, 1 impact player, and they had a terrible season. So to me, if I was in these shoes, I would be marshaling money toward a handful of high impact, proven transfer players, and then go with 7, and then have 5 or 6 people just filling in the cracks, just warm bodies. Run the risk with 7 guys, roll the dice with 7 guys. That's how I would do it. Rutgers already had 4 freshmen committed, so it's hard to do that. You're only going to have 3 other guys. They had 4 freshmen committed. They have, it looks like, 4 players returning. And so they're in a little bit of a different situation personnel-wise. They're not just going to have a 7-man rotation. But philosophically, my feeling is if you're somewhat resource limited, you got to marshal it toward a couple of sure things, impact players. If Rutgers is going to spread the money out because they need 9 or 10 guys to press the hell out of opponents, and I feel like it sounds like having made some calls about this over the last few days, it sounds like that's the plan. We've seen Steve Pikiell's teams press pretty well in spots over the years, but he hasn't really been comfortable doing that as a steady diet. But it sounds like that's their intention to do that this year. I think that could be a good mode for them, a good method for them to generate offense off their defense and to create havoc and sort of regain some of that defensive intensity identity. We'll see. If that is indeed the plan, then that would explain you need 9 or 10 guys to press the hell out of opponents. You can't press the hell out of opponents with 7 guys. So if you're going to spread your money out to press the hell out of opponents, I can see that being the method. But that's my understanding is, Rutgers is trying to spread that money out as best they can. Does Tariq Francis project to be a bench piece or a key player? So I don't know that anybody, and certainly Steve Pikiell's not telling a player you're going to be a bench piece, and he's not telling somebody you're going to be a starter. I mean, I'm sure Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, that was understood, but Pikiell's MO is to say you'll be able to compete for a starting job. I'm sure that's what he told Tariq Francis. I'm sure that's what he tells us about everyone he's bringing in. In reality, Tariq Francis is probably a combo guard coming off the bench, which is, to me, that's fine. I don't project him, and I've seen him play. I have actually seen Tariq Francis play, and I think he could help Rutgers in the right role. The right role being combo guard off the bench, help press. He's a good athlete. He's quick. Be one of those small, quick, pesky guards that makes life difficult for an opponent. Like, I could totally see him having a role there coming off the bench. He can handle the ball in spots. He has a nose for the basket, which is something some Rutgers needs. I don't see him being a 30-minute a game starter. I don't think that's anyone's intention. I see him helping them off the bench. So is that how Steve Pikiell's going to announce it publicly, or is that how he's going to pitch it to Tariq Francis? I doubt it. But ultimately, that's what I see his role being. I have asked Steve, are you going to press? Is that going to be your base defense? That seems to be the plan. So small, quick, pesky guards. Could Francis have a role in a group of those guards? Sure. From what I understand, Rutgers did not invest a whole ton in him. He could be a good value add if he can help them situationally. I know there's been a lot of criticism of the pickup, but I do wonder how many people have criticized him have seen him play, or this just seems like the criticism is coming in a vacuum. Like Rutgers still has 3 players to add without knowing how much they've allocated to Francis or what they foresee as his role. I mean, it's hard for me to really criticize that. From what I can gather, he helps them off the bench as a combo guard, helps them press, institute a pressing defense. I think he can be a plus at the right price, which I believe, again, this is all very non-transparent. The vibe I get is that they got him at a value amount, and Rutgers needs to have value because they don't have a lot of money. I mean, they are looking to add some big guards to add some size to the backcourt. I know one of the guards they're looking at, I'm not at liberty to give out names. One of them is definitely $1 million+ player. If they get this player, you'll know this is $1 million+ player. So they're not looking at potential $1 million+ high impact players. There's definitely one on their radar, a guard, a big guard. It's risky to invest. Look, it's risky if you're Rutgers and your whole pot is $4.5 million. It's risky to invest $1.5 million on one player. Okay. And this $4.5 million is just not a lot of money relative to your Big Ten high major peers. Rutgers is in the bottom 10% with that figure. They're lower than Seton Hall, or at best equal to Seton Hall with that figure. So, they do have to moneyball it to a degree. They can't commit $800,000 to Lathan Somerville when he's not athletic enough to protect the rim, and he's not a very good defender, and he doesn't really pass the ball. Washington wants to pay him close to $1 million, and they have money to burn. Then fine, that's fine for Washington. They didn't exactly do well with their money last year. They were terrible last year, Washington. Even though they invested multiple millions in one big man. So I don't know. Do they really even know what they're doing? But, for sticking with Lathan, I said this in last week's podcast, for him to say he left for his development as a player, he should just stop lying. It's all above board now. You can say it's for the development of your bank account. Tell the truth. Don't lie through your teeth. Just tell the truth. So don't act like you got caught with your hand in the cookie jar. You can eat the cookie now, dude. It's okay. But yes, Rutgers, they don't have a lot of money. The collective has much less than the other collectives and most of the collectives in the Big Ten, and that money is still going to matter. That money still has an impact on teams' war chests. I mean, yeah, you have X amount to revenue share. Rutgers has $3.5 million of revenue share. Yes, they have that, but everybody has that in their league plus millions from collectives and millions from alumni giving that Rutgers doesn't have. So they really have to moneyball things. But again, that said, my style would be like concentrating that more in the hands of a smaller group of players. They didn't seem intent on spreading it out more, but if you're going to play a pressing game, you have to do that. All right, next question. How many wins does Pike need? Pikes, the nickname is actually Pikes. I know people call him Pike. The need to stay off the hot seat. Feels like under 500 in the Big Ten will be in trouble, fairly or unfairly. I think the answer to that question really depends on the new president, new AD, what their priorities are, how they view what he's done, what kind of relationship he strikes up with them. Given Steve's contract and how scarce money's going to be once revenue sharing kicks in, do you really want to devote a ton of money to buying him out when that and taking that money away from revenue sharing, or they're going to have to make decisions with this money. So I feel like he's probably got 2 more years to write the program, given the state of his contract. The institution also has to take some blame here for not giving him an NIL infrastructure, no AD, no GM. My thing to Rutgers would be modernize the machinery for the new AD. Modernize the machinery, and let's see what he can do with it. So Rutgers has to grade its coaches against the curve. I mean, Greg Schiano hasn't had a 500 season in the Big Ten in football, but he's not on the hot seat, and rightly so. Rutgers, the institution, is so backwards in its approach to its athletics that you have to grade your coaches against the curve. So to me, give Peichel the GM, give him, some institutional funding here, something to work with financially in terms of revenue share, and then see what he can do with it. Give him a cycle or two to see what he can do with it before we start putting people on the hot seat. That coupled with his contract, my guess would be, unless they were really bad this coming season, it would be hard for me to foresee him being on the hot seat at the end of next year. But, again, it's really up to the new people in charge. We heard all year. Another question. We heard all year changes to Rutgers staff were likely. With the way the season went, are you surprised there's no movement there? What I'll say to that is most assistant coaches' contracts run from June to June. So let's see what happens over the next 2 months. There's a lot of movement in assistant coaching world in the late spring. You just don't hear about it much because it mostly flies under the radar. They're not head coaches. I do feel like they should add Brett McConnell in some capacity. I know Steve has a good relationship with Brett. Brett wants to continue to coach. I don't foresee him taking some sort of GM or front office type job. We'll have to see how it shakes out, but I wouldn't rule out any changes at all to anybody's staff at this point, given that a lot of this stuff happens in May and June when you get toward the end of the contracts. Is implementing some sort of salary cap the only way to level playing field for schools like Rutgers to compete, or do you see another solution? What's killed Rutgers and Seton Hall, it's not necessarily NIL, as I've said before. It's the ability to transfer without penalty, which is something the courts have ruled on. So that really has taken out of the hands of the NCAA and the colleges. And that's what's created this free-for-all annual bidding cycle that happens in no other sport. The only solution I see is contracts. As far as I can tell, no one wants contracts because the players and their agents don't want contract status, employee status, because the more free agency there is, the more money they can make. Plus, the minute they become employees, everyone's going to know their salaries. Everyone's going to know what they're making. And they don't want that. They want to be able to say, well, I got offered this, or I can make this without anyone knowing what the transparent number is. So the players and their agents, they want this chaos. And schools don't want to go into the contract employee business because becoming a full-time employee comes with health benefits and other long-term costs. So it seems like contracts are a solution. Can you have some sort of contractual arrangement like adjunct faculty where you're not a full-time employee, but you have a contractual arrangement? I think that's what we might see, like 2-year contractual arrangements, like an adjunct faculty, 2-year contractor status for athletes. Maybe that's what is next. But again, if you're going to have contracts, they got to come with buyouts like coaches have. So there's a penalty that has to be paid for leaving. There has to be a disincentive for just breaking a contract. So that has to be written into it. So I think the next movement is going to be some sort of contracts, probably start at 2 years, contractual arrangement. NIL is never going to go away, but when you add contractual commitments, it has the potential to level things off and sort of end some of this annual crazy bidding that goes on in no other sport. If you rein in the transferring, then you rein in to a degree the spending, and that, to me, that helps Rutgers, where fans are not going to shell out millions each season to replenish the rosters, and I'm not blaming fans. That's just not the culture here in the Northeast. Maybe it is at Villanova where all the alumni are filthy rich. Maybe it is at St. John's where there's a billionaire who doesn't care, who just loves basketball and doesn't mind handing gazillions to Rick Pitino. But that's not generally the culture in the Northeast, and that's that's something that you need to. The transferring has to get reined in, I think, in order to help a Rutgers or a Seton Hall rein in the spending and then compete a little bit. So contracts, multi-year contracts are the solution to that. That's probably the next step. How soon? I don't know. We'll have to see. All right. So that's my Rutgers mailbag, Seton Hall mailbag. Does Seton Hall really have $5 to $6 million? And why haven't we seen more activity? Is the market just hyperinflated, or do players just not want to play for Shaw? Okay, I'll try to answer that in parts. I believe Seton Hall, I do believe they have at least $5 million. Have I counted the money? Have I audited Seton Hall? No. Have I seen the briefcase, the bag filled with $100 bills? No, I have not. But I do believe they have $5 million. I think if the administration was saying they had money and then the coaching staff wasn't getting that money, I would hear about it. I would be hearing about it. And so I have to believe, based on what I'm hearing and not hearing, that Seton Hall does in fact have that money. $5 million is a number I've heard. I'm willing to go with that. That's just to be clear, as with Rutgers, what Seton Hall has is mostly institutional rev share money. Their peers, Seton Hall's peers in the Big East, have that plus fan and collective-based NIL that puts them in the $8 to $10 million range. That's where St. John's is. That's where Villanova is. That's where Georgetown is. The $8 to $10 million range is what Seton Hall is competing against with a lot of their peer institutions here in the Big East. So while Seton Hall is in better shape than last offseason when they had $1.5 million, having some capital is better than none. And I do think relative to their peers, they are in better shape. Whereas they had a water pistol and a gunfight last year, they're in better shape, but they're still behind, and the market is hyperinflated right now because these big roller programs and schools are doing their spending first, trying to get the high-priced players locked in before the House settlement is approved and Deloitte starts inspecting everybody's NIL deal. They're all dominoes that are going to fall. So I do think that's why you're seeing a lot of the high-price activity be front-loaded here. Seton Hall's not in the high-priced market right now. They just can't afford to be, even with $5 million. We'll get into how that breaks down in a minute. There are guys Holloway wants. Guards and wings who are good shooters, but not all conference players. And the impression I get is that the market rate or what people are asking for in that spot is like $2 million and up. And if you're Shaheen Holloway, you can't spend. I mean, I'm all for concentrating the wealth in the hands of 5 to 7 players, but he can't spend 40% of his budget on a 10-point per game scorer. That would be negligent. So you kind of have to sift through this and negotiate and debate and see what you can get. Can you get that player for less, or one of those players for less than $2 million? But it seems like this market is hyperinflated, and guys are asking for $2 million for 10 points a game. Seton Hall is interested. They're interested in a high major guard or wing who averages around 10 points a game and shoots around 35% from 3-point range. Are you willing to devote $1.5 million of your $5 million budget to that guy? That's my read on where the market is at. And if you are willing to devote that, then there's probably some other schools that are involved willing to devote that and sort of negotiate or contest you on that. And so you have bidding going on. That's the kind of jockeying that's going on behind the scenes. And I think why Seton Hall has been seeming to move fairly slow. It's easier to lock down like a Bud Clark, who at 5'10", coming from Merrimack, has fewer suitors, although I do think Clark is really good, by the way. I've seen him play. I saw him completely outplay Dylan Harper at Rutgers earlier this year. I'm not saying he's better than Dylan Harper, but the guy's good. Bud Clark, to me, and I'm willing to say this, to sign my name to it, he can hold his own as a starting Big East point guard. So if you're Seton Hall, you have that position in hand, but you got him maybe at market rate that was affordable for you because he's 5'10", he's coming from Merrimack. He doesn't shoot 40% from 3-point range. To me, he's a very good pickup for Seton Hall. And they've nailed down that point guard position. Doesn't mean he's the only point guard they're going to have, but they've nailed down a lead point guard, and that's important. Regarding players, do they want to play for Shaw? I think that's mostly irrelevant. Most of these guys would play for Vlad Putin if he showed them the money. I'm barely exaggerating. If they had misgivings about playing for Vlad Putin, greedy agents would shove them in that direction. That's the way it is right now. Rick Pitino was correct when he said Kadari Richmond's first choice was to stay at Seton Hall if the money was comparable. Of course, last year Seton Hall never had a chance with that pittance they had as their war chest. With Isaiah Coleman, does he really want to go to this basketball backwater of Oklahoma State? He's leaving a coach who developed him into an impact Big East player for Stillwater. Why? Because they paid him big money. So he'll put on a cowboy hat, and you may never hear from him again. It's about the money, folks. And I think, personally, if I was Seton Hall, I don't know. I can't say for sure because I don't know exactly what Isaiah Coleman got. But to me, I would have invested in keeping him. But again, I'm not exactly sure what he got. And if he's up as close to $2 million, they're going to invest a third of their budget into one guy who was the main guy on a 7-win team. I can see why they wouldn't do that. Is Shaw hard on his players? Is he old school demanding? Yes. Is that for everybody? No, it's not. Steve Peichel's like your favorite uncle. He could not be nicer with his players, and he's also lost multiple key players to the portal the last 3 cycles. It's really big. It's really not about coach demeanor, folks. It's about the money. Okay. Are teams like St. John's? Another question. Are teams like St. John's spending $10 million? They're reported to be involved with these multi-million-dollar players. I don't know. Probably. If Seton Hall's allocating $5 million in revenue share as an institution, then St. John's is too. Plus, you add Rapoli's millions into the mix, and whatever else they've scraped up from fans and sponsors. They're probably in that range, and that's the competition right now. Another question. Is it realistic or sustainable business model to take a collection of mid-major players, slap a power conference jersey on them, and expect high major results? Sure, you have Walter Clayton of the world, but it's reasonable to expect these guys to be a pillar of the program. Good question. What I would say, the most reasonable path for Seton Hall is a mix of homegrown guys, mid-major up transfers, and high major transfers. A mix of homegrown guys that you got out of high school and developed over maybe 2 years, mid-major up transfers, and high major transfers. To me, that's the ideal mix. Some retention, some transferring in. And in the mid-major category, there are Jaden Bediakos, there are Quincy McKnights, there are Bryce Aikens out there. In the high major category, there are Dre Davises and Alamir Dawes out there. In the homegrown category, there are God's Wills and Isaiah Coleman's out there. And yes, like I said, I would have done what it took to keep Coleman, without completely breaking my bank. So ideally, you have a mix. Seton Hall has had some of these players. They've had them in the recent past. But you just can't keep and develop guys, 4 or 5 guys for 4 years. You just can't do that if you're Seton Hall anymore. The whole Desi, Isaiah, the whole Kadeen, Ish Sinago, and Angel Delgado, it's not going to happen anymore. What Shaw did at St. Peter's with those guys, he had them for 3 years, and when they burst onto the scene, it's not going to happen anymore. You're not going to have that core you can develop. So ideally, you have to have a mix. You have to have a mix of some guys, homegrown guys, some transfers from high majors who maybe are looking for a second chance somewhere, and some good mid-major, productive mid-major level players who you think can translate up. But you have to get the evaluations right. Last year, Seton Hall had a mix of guys, like we talked about, but they got almost all the transfer evaluations wrong, except Chauncey Jenkins, who I think was capable of helping a Big East team, but got hurt, missed half the season. And then to a lesser degree, Garway Dowell, the jury's out on him. He did show some promise and maybe could help this team next year. They got the rest of the transfer evaluations wrong last year. They've gotten guys right in the past. They've got guys wrong last year. Shaw's had a mixed bag there. Dre Davis, Al Dawes, Bediako, they got right. Chauncey Jenkins was okay, but there were a lot of whiffs last season. In his first 2 recruiting cycles, Shaw identified a high school player in each cycle who can help them. Isaiah Coleman, he got that right. God's Will, who I believe he got right. I think there's a starting caliber Big East center there. So he does have an eye for that. The key is you have to keep those guys now. And so that's a big part of the deal here. Now, God's Will is an important piece to this for Seton Hall because I see, and I think Shaw and his staff see, a potential Big East starting caliber Big East center there. If you have that piece, that's $1 million plus piece, perhaps, if you're going into the portal to find a proven guy. Maybe they have that homegrown guy who can, is he there right at this moment? Maybe not, but can he develop between now and when the ball goes up in November to make that sophomore leap the way many players do under good tutelage? Can he improve the way Jaden Bediako did under this staff's tutelage inside? Maybe. That's what you're hoping for, and that's a key thing. And like when I talked to God's Will at the end of the season, he said, like, I don't want an agent. I don't want to do that. I like it here. I want to stay here. I don't want to get involved in that other stuff. To me, if I'm Seton Hall fans, I give this guy a standing ovation when he comes out of the tunnel in November, because there's not many guys like that around here anymore. If Seton Hall has a chance to keep him for more than 2 years, for 3 or 4 years, and have a starting Big East center in their program, develop in their program, that's sort of the magic bullet or the secret that Seton Hall, they need to do a little bit of that and develop a guy like that. But he could be a unicorn type of guy in that sense. But to me, Seton Hall fans should appreciate that. And hopefully, I'm sure they do. Seton Hall basketball fans are smart. I'm sure they appreciate, they see talent there in a guy who hasn't played much and he wants to be here and doesn't have an agent negotiating for him. And this is a guy who could really help them and solve one piece to that puzzle. So you have Bud Clark, who I think is a Big East point guard. You have God's Will, who I think is a Big East center. He needs some development between now and November, but he's Big East center potential. You have those 2 pieces. That's 2 big pieces. Those are 2 big pieces. So that's a start. And then you need to add the right players. And that's what Shaw's job will be over the next few weeks. Is Shaw in over his head? All right. As a coach, I would say absolutely not. He's a very good, very talented college basketball coach. As a GM who has to play Moneyball, I think he could use some help, as can many of his peers who are new to this. As a fundraiser, I think he could use some help. If Shaw had, I'm comfortable saying, if Shaw had Kyle Neptune's resources, he would have been in the Sweet 16 already. So to me, it's Seton Hall's job to put more resources around him and to add support in the right places, which they're finally starting to do. And for Shaw, he has to learn to get better at the Moneyball valuation part of the job, the fundraising part of the job. And if he's not willing to do that, then he has to be willing to bring in a GM who's going to do all that for him and cede some power to the GM. So I would say, no, he's not in over his head, but he needs some help, like many coaches, many talented coaches do in this environment. Why are there so many departures from Seton Hall? Well, they happen everywhere. There's another question. How could the Big East Player of the Year leave St. John's? How could Xavier Lee walk away or at the very least defer a Princeton degree? So, I mean, this is everywhere right now. Agents, except for the teams that have the most money, who are paying to retain their players year after year, agents are convincing players to test their value. Players hear rumors about what other players are getting and get itchy. Isaiah Coleman went for the most money. Can you blame him for that? You might have done the same thing. I might have done the same thing. Okay, he's wearing a cowboy hat. He's at Oklahoma State. Maybe nobody ever hears from him again, but he got paid, and maybe we can't blame him for that. That's just the system we have. Manny Okorafor, someone asked me about him. He asked for an outrageous amount of money. I mean, he couldn't pass, shoot, or rebound or defend this past year. But he's big, and he figures I can get big man money. Well, maybe Shaw didn't want to shovel a giant chunk of his budget into the fireplace with a guy who was his center on a 7-win team. Can you blame Shaw for that? So, that's why a guy might walk. But he asked for an outrageous amount of money, okay? So, relative to what he produced. So, goodbye. Prince of League Bay, Scotty Middleton. They're guys you'd want back in a vacuum, of course. You want some guys back. I've mentioned the Missouri model. You do want some guys back. Missouri, brought a core of guys back from a terrible team. They brought a key core of guys back. They brought in 5 impact transfers. They meshed it all together and had an NCAA tournament team that was ranked for a while. So ideally, yeah, that's the model. But those guys have to be willing. Those guys who are staying, those 5 guys who are back from that 7-win last place team, have to be willing to come back at the right price. They have to be willing to accept roles. They have not earned They haven't really earned a whole lot of cachet to dictate their roles or a price. So there's some of that back and forth here. Do I think Shaw would have welcomed Prince or Scotty back? Yes. Do I think did the terms they set meet what was appropriate given what they produced last season and how bad the team was? Maybe not. And so you want some continuity, but at what cost when you're coming off a 7-win season? It doesn't seem like there was a whole lot of alignment there. But yes, they have at the moment as we speak, like I said, God's will be back. Garway Dual, I think there's a pretty good chance he'll be back. We'll see how it shakes out. He's a guy who can help you for sure. Showed some improvement throughout the course of the season. Seemed like he could be a Big East caliber defender. Okay. And maybe, a guy who could score the ball. He did shoot and score better as the season went on. He certainly has the body to do it. So you're retaining a small core of guys, probably not as much as ideal that you would like. We did with the addition of a point guard, does this move Felton to the 2 or is he out the door? To me, Felton is more of a combo guard who's closer to a shooting guard. I can see a role coming for him coming off the bench as a shot maker who takes good care of the ball and makes the smart play. I could totally see that, but he's not going to start, I don't think, next year on a competitive Big East team. I don't know if he's out the door. I'm not willing to say that. I'm going to just throw a coin in the air and say it's 50-50. Again, I'm guessing. I don't know everything. No one's told me that. I'm guessing based on just, intuition. What's holding up signings? Well, they have 2 signings now. Seton Hall. Is the settlement review holding up signings? No, I don't think the settlement has much to do with it. The settlement seems inevitable. It's more about navigating the market. The big fish are going to eat first, and with no NIL and $5 million in rev share, Seton Hall is not a big fish. That said, I think there are a lot of players out there who can still help them, and I believe Shaw is eyeing up some potential impact guards who he thinks he can get at a reasonable value. We'll have to see. We got to let it play out. With Seton Hall, they have a lot of spots left, so there's a lot of potentials to fill in this roster still. I wouldn't panic and get antsy because they've been slower than some peers. Their peers have more money, and the big fish are eating first, but there are a lot of fish out there. Let's revisit this when we see what their roster looks like. Someone asked me about Willard's return. Great for the league. How bad for the Hall? Can he now squeeze the Hall for recruits? What I'll say is Willard's return is great for the league. I agree. It's a sign that being basketball first still matters. How great is it for Villanova? It depends on how they're grading. Versus Kyle Neptune, it's pretty great. Versus Jay Wright, we'll see. Is it bad for the Hall in the sense that Kevin will have resources now and he'll get more out of a talented roster than Kyle Neptune did? Yeah, he's going to do better there than Kyle Neptune did. So, yeah, that's bad for the Hall. But make no mistake, Kyle Neptune could beat Seton Hall in any recruiting battle he wanted to. That doesn't change with Kevin. It's about money, not the coach. When it comes to recruiting, Seton Hall and it's $5 million is not going to compete with Villanova and it's $10 million. It's just not. Even if Elmer Fudd was coaching the Wildcats. Elmer Fudd, okay? If he was the coach, it wouldn't matter. This is what the money's done in terms of recruiting. So will there be traction in league expansion, Big East expansion? Eventually, probably. I think the networks are going to demand it. The TV partner is going to demand it eventually. Keep an eye on the ACC. If it starts to implode, Notre Dame would move the needle for the Big East in basketball. I don't think the league's just going to let anybody in because it would cut into everyone's pie, into their rev share. They're not going to let somebody in unless they move the needle for the media contract value. Notre Dame moves the needle. That's what I'll say on that. I'm not saying Notre Dame is imminent. I'm not saying that it's a discussion. I'm saying hypothetically, I could see Notre Dame. That's the type of team they would add if the ACC was getting wobbly. So keep that in the back pocket for down the road. A lot of chatter about the GM role and who's filling that role with Mike McBride gone to Rice. So Seton Hall AD Brian Feld said they're going to hire an attorney type person to help the GM style logistics. Probably won't see that person until the school year's over is my guess at this point. It won't be till after the cycle for sure. They will have someone in place for the next school year. I'm sure of that. Is Shaw on the clock after this year? I'm going to end with this question. I would say I hope not, because Kevin Willard got 6 years to make the NCAA tournament. He had nowhere near Holloway's accomplishments as a head coach to date. Kevin faced nothing even close to the headwinds in the sport that Holloway's battling now. Not to mention Holloway's status as a favorite son, which doesn't mean a ton, but it doesn't mean nothing. That doesn't mean Shaw's coach for life. It doesn't mean he gets a lifetime pass. It doesn't mean he gets an indefinite pass. But to me, it means that he has to get what Willard got, 6 years. Patience paid off for Seton Hall then, and it can pay off again. In fact, patience is the one thing Seton Hall has as a job that's going for it. And I want to be clear. There's not a single coach in the country, I'm willing to wager there's not a single coach in the country with a resume like Holloway's that wants a Seton Hall job. It's viewed as a no-win or uphill climb type of situation. Any other coach who comes in here going to be looking to take the Hall's money and upgrade to a new gig as quickly as humanly possible. Maybe Donald Copeland's an exception. He has an NCAA tournament on his resume. But Seton Hall has a rare opportunity to have a coach here for the long term who has undeniable coaching talent. You do not get St. Peter's to accomplish what they did, not just one run, but over the course of the last 3 years, how good they were in that league. You don't get a 25-win, fourth-place Big East finish and an IT title. That's pretty good work, too, on a fraction, I might add, of other high majors' budgets that season. As free agency started to creep in, Seton Hall did that. So there's coaching talent there. But Shaw has to do his part. Look, 7-win last-place seasons. They're not going to cut it. No one's going to put up with that over time. But the one thing Seton Hall can sell as a perk is patience. Kevin grew into the job over time. I think Shaw deserves a comparable amount of space to grow into the job, space and time to grow into it, especially in this new landscape that is turned into the Himalayas when you're coaching at a school like Seton Hall. So that's what I would say about that. I really appreciate people sending their questions in. Appreciate you fans. I know these are difficult, uncertain times. I don't have all the answers. Some of what I'm saying is informed speculation. Some of it is just purely my speculation based on my intuition, common knowledge, and just being on the beat for a long time. I'm not reporting anything per se here. I'm giving you what my instincts are based on conversations I have, but I did try to look into your questions and get the best possible answers I can. Some of my stuff I say might wind up being wrong, and if that's the case, well, welcome to the world we're in where everything is upside down. But I hope that's helpful. We'll be back with the Jersey Jump Shot, hopefully with an interview format next week. Maybe we'll do another mailbag once the rosters are complete. I plan on trying to do this at least until through May, at some point in May, having the podcast until we know who the 13 guys are for both Seton Hall and Rutgers and what the mid-majors shakeouts have looked like. So thanks for bearing with me. Hope this was helpful, and I'll see you again soon on the Jersey Jump Shot.